So, let's dive into a story that starts with a really simple kind of financial puzzle, but it ends up asking some pretty tough questions about sin, love, and what forgiveness is all about. What if the real measure of forgiveness isn't about what you've done wrong, but about how you respond to being set free?
Okay, so at the heart of all this is a short parable. A simple story that's really designed to set up a much deeper spiritual mystery.
The story kicks off with a setup we can all understand. There's a moneylender, and you've got two people who owe him money. Simple enough.
Now, the first person owed 500 denarii. And to give you some context, 1 denarius was about what a regular laborer made in a day. So we're talking about a massive, life-altering debt here, way more than a year's income. It's an impossible amount.
The second person owed 50 denarii. Now that's a lot less, for sure, maybe 2 months' wages. But it was still a debt they absolutely could not pay back.
And here's where the story takes its first big turn. The moneylender sees that neither of them can pay him back, so he does something pretty extraordinary. He just forgives both debts, completely. Wipes the slate clean for both of them.
And that leads us to the central question of the whole story. It's the exact question Jesus asked his dinner host, a religious guy named Simon the Pharisee. He asks, okay, so which one of them is going to love him more? Who's going to feel more grateful?
Simon's answer is, just pure logic. And Jesus says, you got it. But here's the thing. This whole story is just the warm-up act for a real-life situation that's about to happen right there at the dinner table. And it's going to flip this simple logic right on its head.
This is where we get to the puzzle that has really tripped people up for centuries. A woman, who everyone knows has lived a sinful life, comes in and shows this incredible act of love toward Jesus. And Jesus connects her great love to the fact that her many sins have been forgiven. So it makes you wonder, right? Did her love somehow earn her forgiveness? Well, the source material we're looking at says, nope, something way more profound is going on here.
Okay, to solve this mystery, we first have to kind of recalibrate how we think about this thing called sin. We need to see this debt not from our human point of view, but from the Creator's.
According to the source, when you measure any imperfection against the absolute perfection of God, the whole idea of a small sin versus a big sin just kind of falls apart. Any debt, no matter the size, breaks that connection. It's like a light switch. It's either on or it's off. You're either perfect or you're not.
But, and this is a really important distinction, the source does say there's a difference in the gravity of sin. Hurting other people is serious, absolutely. But an offense against the Creator himself, the very source of life and reality, well, that's seen as being on a completely different level. It's like the difference between breaking a law and attacking the lawmaker.
So, here's the bottom line. Whether you feel like your debt is 50 denarii or 500, from the divine perspective, it's all fundamentally unpayable. We are all in the exact same boat. Forgiveness isn't about a cosmic payment plan. It has to be a total cancellation of the entire debt.
Well, that makes you wonder then, doesn't it? If every sin creates this massive gap, is there some line you can cross? Is there a debt so huge it just becomes unforgivable?
To really push this to the limit, the source asks a pretty radical question. What is the absolute worst thing a created being could possibly do? And the conclusion it comes to is the ultimate act of rebellion, for the creature to actually murder its own creator.
And right here is where things get absolutely mind-blowing. The source actually points to the crucifixion, and it argues that humanity did commit this very act. And yet, even then, forgiveness was offered to anyone who recognized what happened and turned back.
I mean, think about that for a second. If the ultimate sin, killing God in human form, is on the table for forgiveness, then what in the world could possibly be beyond the reach of grace? What is the one thing that can't be forgiven? The answer is actually pretty simple, and it's not what you'd think. The unforgivable state isn't some horrible act you commit. It's the ongoing, conscious, persistent refusal of the pardon being offered. It's like a drowning person constantly pushing away the lifeguard. The only thing that can't be forgiven is not wanting to be forgiven in the first place.
Okay, so now we have all the pieces to go back and finally solve that puzzle from the beginning. It all comes down to a huge misunderstanding about what love is doing in this story.
See, the source argues that most of us have the sequence completely backward. Love is not the cause of forgiveness, it's the effect. First comes grace, this free, totally unearned cancellation of an infinite debt. Then comes the realization. The person finally truly gets the massive scale of that gift.
And only then, as a result, that profound realization produces this overwhelming response of love and gratitude.
So when Jesus says the woman's great love showed her sins were forgiven, what he meant was her love was the evidence, it was the proof of her forgiveness, not the reason for it. She loved a ton because she knew she had been forgiven a ton. Simon the Pharisee, on the other hand, loved very little because he was totally blind to the true infinite size of his own debt.
And this brings us right to the final and maybe the most personal part of this whole thing, the danger of looking in the mirror and failing to see our own debt.
If you look at Simon the Pharisee's ledger, he looked great, right? He fasted, he tithed, he checked all the religious boxes. But the divine reality was that it was all for show. His attitude was self-righteous and judgmental because he had deceived himself. He was completely blind to his own desperate spiritual need. And because of that, real love for God was totally absent. And that lack of love, the source argues, was actually a much bigger sin in God's eyes.
So the final point is this. According to the source, if you truly get what grace is, it becomes impossible to feel spiritually superior to anyone. The moment you realize your good deeds can't pay your debt, you see that you stand forgiven for the exact same reason as everybody else. It's a free gift. And that realization doesn't produce pride, it produces real, genuine humility. And so we're left with this final question, which really shifts the focus. The source suggests the point isn't to anxiously try and measure our sin, but to honestly measure our gratitude. If love is the truest evidence of a forgiven heart, then what does the size of our love for God and for other people say about how well we've understood the incredible gift we've been given?